So far, we've talked about the first four steps in theory building to look at our assumptions, to ask questions, to conduct systematic observations, and then to propose the actual theory itself, using various elements, concepts, to build a framework that will guide our research. So the next step in the process here is to actually, out of that architecture, out of the framework of that new theory that you've just developed, we come these fundamental questions we call hypotheses. These are different than the broad questions that we asked early on. These are very targeted, focused, specific questions that are a direct result of the structure of the theory itself. And these are the guiding questions then for the specific research that we'll employ. And so the nature of those questions has everything to do with the type of research, the nature of the research that will be conducted. And so there has to be a match, a fit between the hypothesis, the question you're asking, or questions you're asking, and that research design. So out of our theory, we've developed a set of ideas that we're looking to answer. And in the example that we're using of reading aloud to middle school students, our direct hypothesis might have something to do with when a teacher reads half an hour a day, 5 days a week, students read more. Another hypothesis might be that when a teacher reads half an hour a day, 5 days a week, students' comprehension increases. And we might have a third hypothesis that says we think that that comprehension will increase more rapidly for males than for females. Those would be maybe three direct hypotheses that come out of our particular question, and then we would need to design our research study around that. Consequently, as we move on to the next step, that's what we actually have to do. We have to build a research design. We have to choose the strategies that we're going to employ. And tomorrow we'll go on and look at what some of those specific design issues might be. But fundamentally, we're looking at comparing groups of individuals who have some experiences and contrasting those experiences to see if the treatment, in this case reading, to middle school students makes a difference. So we'll build some design and we'll go out and collect data from a group of middle school students. Often is the case in educational psychology research because we're working in classrooms where we have intact groups of people. That governs much of what we do with the design. So I'll come back to that point later on, but it's one of the unique aspects of educational psychology is the nature of the research that we do is governed by the fact that we want that research to be done as much as possible out in the real world, in classrooms where kids are learning, and that's oftentimes creates some restrictions on how we go about building our designs. The next step in the process is now we've collected the data, we have some information that we can use. We're going to compare the results of that study with our hypotheses to see if they're consistent, and that's done by statistical means. There are a variety of statistical tools that we can use. We don't just eyeball the numbers and say, oh, I think that's good. We have to go through some very strict processes to try to evaluate whether the differences between individuals are based on chance or are they based on the treatment, whatever our treatment was. In this case, our treatment was reading to middle school students. So our analysis of that, let's say for the sake of argument, that the outcome indicates that when teachers read to middle school students, they tend to read more themselves. Their reading went up by 10 minutes a day over the course of time. That might be a significant difference. We also find that when they read more, that there's an increase in their comprehension, let's say by 2%. So, but we find that there's no difference between boys and girls. That third hypothesis we had really doesn't make a difference whether our subjects are boys or girls. We find that pattern in both groups. So we've got two pieces of evidence that look like they support our initial ideas, our initial hypotheses, and one that doesn't. And so what do we do next? Well, the next thing is to step back and look at how that information fits into our theory and to report that out to the world. It's essential in social science research that we report findings of our research in those professional publications that I talked about. So when you do research, it's incumbent upon you to share that research out, assuming that you have some positive findings. If we don't have any positive findings at all, no one's going to publish the research. So we have to have some positive findings or some findings that are consistent with our hypotheses in order for those things to get published. Why is that so important? Because by publishing it, then that opens that information up to the rest of the educational psychology world, to the world more broadly, and says, this is what we found. And so that allows other people to go out and say, that's interesting. I think I'll try to replicate that study. Or, oh, I think you did something fundamentally inaccurate there, and I'm going to challenge you on that. That kind of public dissemination builds dialogue and interaction, and that ultimately results in us helping to do additional research and find out more information. So that public dissemination is critical. But we also then, based on our own research, based on what other people say, we have to consider, does our theory now, based on this initial set of evidence, does our theory need revision? Do we need to change something? Do we need to tweak it? Maybe not. In this case, the gender question, our gender hypothesis, seemed to indicate that there was no difference. So maybe we strip that gender difference idea out of it, or maybe we think, well, I'm still think that that's true. We need to replicate this study with a different group of kids and see if the gender thing makes a difference this time. So you might go back and do the exact same study with a different population if you're convinced that that research hypothesis is still accurate. In any case, what's going to happen then is we're going to repeat that entire process over again. And this is the reason the cycle goes on and on and on, is that it's not a question of doing one research study and then you're done. Oh, we found the answer. That just isn't the way that it works. Part of that is because we need to at least find it twice to have any degree of certainty at all. And it's even better if somebody else finds it, not just you, because of those biases we talked about. And so it really takes an extensive amount of time in the social sciences, a pattern of research findings, before we begin to talk about something as being really solid. One of the things that I want to point out is that we're talking about, while we're seeking the truth, the answer in our research, we frame our results in terms of probability. The more evidence that we accumulate, the higher the probability that our hypothesis is correct, the higher the probability that our theory is accurate. but it takes that large body of research across an extended period of time by a wide range of people before we start to develop some degree of certainty about those things. There's a lot of critique, there's a lot of process that goes on. So consequently, some of the top theorists that we're going to talk about spent the majority of their lives, if not all their lives, working on a single theory. Because it takes that building and building. And the more complex a theory is, the more likely it is that somebody's going to have to spend a lot of time working on it. Oftentimes, research will be very narrow and focus on a very specific thing, but other times they will be these large, massive theories that is trying to explain lots of stuff, and that makes it harder to provide the evidence that we need. A lot more things can go wrong. So again, the point of this is that the process of theory building takes an extensive set of time, perhaps even a lifetime, for a researcher to do. Thus the symbol of the ongoing cycle going over and over and over again.